Two ships, each longer than 3 football fields, are running side by side in the open ocean. The gap between them is about 180 feet. They are doing 13 knots, and they will hold that gap exactly for the next 4 hours. If either one drifts, there is no room to correct. And strung between them, over the water, a pallet of food is sliding across on a steel cable. This is how you feed 5,000 people who cannot stop. An aircraft carrier does not pull into port for groceries. It does not anchor. For months, it has to be resupplied while moving by another ship that has to match its speed and heading to within a fraction. In weather, it does not get to choose. And there is a problem nobody tells you about until you are standing on that deck. 2 large hulls running that close do not simply sit there. The water between them speeds up, the pressure drops, and the ships start pulling toward each other. The sea itself is trying to close the gap. Every second of those 4 hours, someone is steering against it. Start with the arithmetic, because it is the whole reason this exists. A carrier crew is around 5,000 people. They eat 4 times a day because the ship runs around the clock, and there is no such thing as everyone eating at once. That is roughly 17,000 meals every 24 hours. Not portions, meals. 17,000 meals a day means the ship burns through food faster than almost anything else it carries. Fuel for the reactors lasts decades, food lasts weeks. The single most perishable thing on a nuclear-powered warship is lunch. So the food has to come to the ship. And the only way to do that without stopping is to bring a second ship alongside and physically connect them while both are underway. The Navy calls it replenishment at sea. Everyone on board calls it unrep. And when it is scheduled, it reorganizes the entire day. It begins with the approach, and the approach is the part that goes wrong. The supply ship holds a straight course and a constant speed. The carrier comes up from behind and slides into position beside it. Not in front, not behind. Beside. Closing 100,000 tons into a lane 180 feet wide, using an object that has no brakes. There is no reversing out of a mistake here. A ship that size takes over a mile to stop and needs hundreds of yards to turn. Once you are alongside, the only way out is forward. So the approach is flown, not driven. Small corrections constantly by someone watching a distance line the whole time. That distance line is exactly what it sounds like. A rope strung between the 2 ships with colored markers every 20 feet. No screen, no instrument. A sailor looks at which color is over the water and calls the number. It is the oldest piece of equipment in the whole operation, and nobody has found a reason to replace it. And here is something most people get wrong about the ship delivering the food. It is not, in the usual sense, a warship, and most of the people aboard it are not sailors. Supply ships are run by the military Sea Lift Command and crewed largely by civilian mariners. The people keeping a carrier strike group fed are, on paper, merchant seamen. While the 2 ships are connected, a flag flies from both of them to tell every other vessel in sight what is happening and to stay clear. It is a simple, visible signal in an operation full of them. At this distance, at this speed, nobody wants to rely on a radio call that might not be heard. Now the ships have to be connected. A line is shot across the gap, and that thin line pulls a heavier one, and that pulls a steel cable called a span wire. The wire is tension between the 2 ships and becomes the road. Everything crossing between these hulls for the next 4 hours crosses on it, and the wire cannot be rigid. The ships are moving independently in a live sea. One rolls left while the other rolls right, and the distance between the 2 attachment points changes constantly. So the tension is managed automatically, paying out and hauling in, to keep a cable strung between 2 moving objects from simply snapping. Then the pallets start moving. Food, spare parts, mail, everything the ship cannot make itself. Each load rides out over open water on a trolley, 20 or 30 feet above the surface, and lands on the receiving deck where a team is waiting to unhook it and clear the spot. Because another one is already on the way. Watch where the crew stands during this. Not under the load. Never under the load. If a wire parts under tension, it does not fall gently, it whips, and it will go through anything in its path. The deck under a span wire is marked, and it stays empty. And that rule is not one anyone tests. Fuel moves the same way, through a hose slung on the same kind of rig. A carrier's reactors need nothing, but its aircraft drink constantly, and the escort ships around it burn conventional fuel. So the tanker feeds the group, hundreds of thousands of gallons, pumped between two ships that are both moving. Not everything crossing that wire is food. Ammunition moves the same way, and when it does, the rules change. The transfer slows down, the deck clears further, and the people handling it work to a procedure that assumes the worst case at every step. Same cable, same ships, entirely different atmosphere. There is a second delivery route, and it runs through the air. A helicopter lifts a cargo net off the supply ship's deck, carries it across, and sets it down on the carrier without either ship changing anything. They call it vertical replenishment. It looks easier than the cable. It is not. The pilot is holding a hover over a moving deck while carrying a swinging weight underneath the aircraft that he cannot see. The load wants to pendulum. The deck is not level, and the man who unhooks it has to walk under a suspended net to do his job. The advantage is that the helicopter does not care about the gap. It can serve ships that are miles apart or reach a deck that is too small to rig a wire to. So a big resupply usually runs both at once, cable across the water, helicopters over the top, and the receiving deck deals with two streams landing at the same time. And all of this has a clock on it. Every hour alongside is an hour both ships are locked into a straight line at a fixed speed, unable to maneuver freely. So it is done fast, and it is done in daylight when possible. And when it is finished, the ships separate and get their freedom back. And there is one order everybody alongside is listening for. Emergency breakaway. It means something has gone wrong. A steering failure, a fire, a ship losing power. And the two hulls have to separate immediately, whatever is still hanging on the wire. When it is called, the rigs are released rather than recovered. Loads are cut loose, and both ships turn away from each other at once. Everything on that deck is designed so it can be abandoned in seconds. That is the real reason the crew never stands where they are not supposed to stand. Subscribe. Now the second half of the problem, and it is the half nobody films. Several hundred tons of supplies are now sitting on a deck. They have to be somewhere else. Down inside a steel building with no wide doors, no straight corridors, and no room to spare before the ship can do anything else. Some of it moves on forklifts in spaces that were not designed with forklifts in mind. The rest moves the way it has always moved, a line of people shoulder to shoulder, passing boxes hand to hand down a passageway, through hatches, down ladders, until the last box is where the list says it goes. That human chain is not nostalgia, and it is not for show. In a ship this cramped, people are the only cargo handler that fits everywhere. Every hand in that line belongs to someone who has a completely different job. A mechanic, a technician, a clerk. And today, for a few hours, everybody moves food. The storerooms are packed to a system because you cannot dig for anything at sea. What gets eaten first goes nearest the door. Refrigerated goes one place, frozen another, dry stores another, and every box has to be accounted for. Because running out of something in the middle of an ocean is not an inconvenience you can solve. From there, it goes to the people who actually turn it into meals. The galley on a carrier is not a kitchen in any sense you would recognize. It runs in shifts, 24 hours, and it never fully shuts down because there is always a watch section that has just come off duty and needs to eat. The cooks are called culinary specialists, and their day starts before almost anyone else's. Bread is baked overnight while the ship is quiet because the ovens and the mixers need space and time that they simply do not have once the crew is awake and moving. Then the serving line opens and the whole ship funnels through it. Not at once, that is impossible, but in a rolling sequence tied to the watch rotation, so the flow is continuous and the line never fully clears. Feeding 5,000 people is not one event. It is a process that never actually stops. And behind the serving line, there is a compartment almost nobody thinks about. The scullery. Every tray, every cup, every piece of cutlery used by 5,000 people, 4 times a day, comes back here to be washed by hand and machine in a small hot room by sailors who will do it again in 6 hours. It is worth sitting with that number. Around 17,000 meals means something on the order of 17,000 trays, every single day for months. The scullery is the least glamorous job on the ship and the one that stops the entire crew from getting sick if it is done badly. So what happens if a replenishment does not happen? Weather closes in, the sea state rises past what the rig can take, and the operation is called off. Nothing dramatic occurs that day. The ship just moves closer to a number that nobody wants to reach, and the menu quietly starts to change. Fresh food goes first. Milk, then fruit, then vegetables, then anything that had to be kept cold. What is left is frozen and canned, and the crew notices immediately because food is the one part of shipboard life that everybody experiences the same way, every day. This is why the Navy treats a supply ship as a warship and not as a truck. A carrier's endurance is not set by its reactors, which will run for years. It is set by how long you can keep feeding the people inside it. Take away the resupply, and the most advanced warship ever built has a shelf life measured in weeks. For scale, a carrier setting out carries something in the order of 1 million pounds of food in its storerooms, and that is not a comfortable margin. It is enough to reach the next replenishment with a reserve, and the whole schedule of a deployment is built backwards from that fact. Go back to the 2 ships and the cable. Everything about that picture looks like heavy engineering. Steel, tension, tonnage, 180 feet of moving water. And what is crossing on that wire is bread and coffee and boxes of fruit. That is the part that stays with you. The most complicated seamanship the Navy performs on a routine day, 2 ships locked together at speed with the sea trying to pull them into each other, exists so that a 19-year-old 3 decks down can sit on a bench and have dinner. And when the last pallet is across, the wires come down, the ships separate, and both go back to what they were doing. Nobody marks it. It will happen again in a few days, and again after that, for the entire deployment. Which raises a different question about that ship. With 5,000 people aboard and nowhere to go, what happens when someone gets seriously ill? That is the next one.